Hey guys, welcome to Black Gumbo. Here are 5 things that nobody warned you about as a new gardener. Now I've had a pretty discouraging year in terms of performance in my garden, and if I was a new gardener, I'd be really discouraged. Nobody told me some of the things that I'm experiencing when I was new. I just saw other people having bug problems and herbicide issues and things like that on YouTube, and I thought, well, that happens to them, it hadn't happened to me. And so I blissfully powered on and thought, hey, everything's great. But when problems came, it could be discouraging. I've got such a small backyard and a small garden that when problems do happen, they're usually pretty big size in comparison to the overall garden. And so, if I lose 1 or 2 beds of my garden for some calamity that happens, or if my whole garden goes away, and I could be very discouraged by that. So in the garden, when you get started, you're all excited to get out there and plant a plot or get some pots going on your balcony or dig in a fresh bed or something, and you're all excited as a new person and things don't work out. But no one warns you about these things and all the things that can happen. And one of the things, number one, that can happen is that you have to expect that you're going to have failures. You're going to have failures. Things are going to come up and challenge you, and you're going to have failures. You're going to plant seeds, they're not going to sprout. You're going to grow things up, they're going to get eaten up by bugs. You're going to mix up a new garden mix soil following some recipe you found online, and it's not going to work out for you. Or maybe you're going to try to pot some plants and you're going to find, wow, I don't have any sunlight on my balcony. I have to garden somewhere else. These are challenges that you can learn from, and we can overcome. Let me show you some of the challenges I've had this year. All right, so we come out this morning to look at our squash and see if we have any spider mites left, and it looks like we got them all, but you can see the damage. You can see that almost a transparency there where the leaf has not grown back from the spider mite damage. And but we've stopped the damage here at least. I'll take this leaf and this leaf off. Got a little fruit coming in there. And there's our other damaged leaf over there, and this one's pretty bad. You can see this one's gonna have to go, but we got all the mites off of there as far as I can tell. These guys right here, this is summer squash, and they're looking a little yellow, and I don't know why. I suspect maybe there's a little rich manure mixed into my potting mix. I use some of that to revitalize some of my older potting mix. And that can burn your plants. It could be a overwatering thing. These have been out here in the rain a lot, and they're pretty moist. There's a lot of reasons your plants can yellow like that. So the biggest challenge I've had this year is I discovered that the hay I was using for mulch, it was a Bermuda coastal hay, and it doesn't seed, but it poisoned my plants because it had herbicide in it. Now I've got two and a half beds that have been poisoned with an herbicide. My tomato crop, my main tomatoes, are stunted. They might give fruit. I'm still waiting to see. But yeah, that was a challenge that really disappointed me. There's a whole video on that. I'll link to it up in the top of the video there. You can go see how disappointing that is. But you know what? I learned from it. A lot of other people are learning from it. I'm sharing my failure there, and a lot of people are learning from it. And so that's, in the end, that's a good thing. And we'll recover those beds. Number 2, you cannot be a slave to a formula. There are many different ways to do things in the garden, and you cannot just say, okay, this one is the right way, and I have to do all the things that guy told me to do on the YouTube video. You can't be trying to do a recipe like you're making a cake or you're making something, building a structure or something. There are a number of approaches to gardening that are successful and legitimate and useful, and you don't have to have all the stuff that everyone's got. You don't have to follow somebody's example. You've got your square foot gardening, you've got your hugel beds, you've got your raised beds, you've got your container gardening, you've got your in the ground gardening, you've got your hay bale gardening, you have your organic gardening, you've got synthetic fertilizer gardening, now you've got aquaponics and all kinds of things coming out like that. Man, if you tried to follow all the techniques that are out there, you drive yourself crazy. Use the resources that you have and garden in the way that works best for you and your climate. In my backyard, I have a 1/4 acre of a lot in suburbia, and most of that 1/4 acre is taken up by a house. I have limited space, so I can't come in here and do a no-till big flat bed in my backyard. It just doesn't, there's not enough room. I don't get enough sun. The house covers half of my yard, so I have to use what I can where I can, and I've chosen a raised bed. It's really now a semi-raised bed, because over the years it works down into the clay and the soil, and I'm gardening somewhat above the surface and somewhat below the natural grade of the land. That works for me. I'd love to do some of these other techniques I've seen, but I just don't have the ability to do it. I don't have the room, I don't have the resources. And so you've got to stick with what you can do and the things that work for you. I'm going to show you how I do it on my videos. I'm going to show you how I pot tomatoes and how I pot eggplant and squash this year. I showed those videos. You don't have to do it that way. A lot of guys just dump some bagged topsoil into a container and stick their plant in, and they do fine. My methods I've tailored for me, I've tailored for my climate, and you should learn from a wide variety of videos. When you watch gardeners on YouTube, learn from them, glean from them, take what you can use and what works for you and what you can actually realistically accomplish, and take tidbits of wisdom from them and their experience. But you don't have to be a slave to their particular way of doing it. That's dangerous. Number 3, gardening is not always quaint and pretty. We like to look at gardening books, and I've got the Heirloom Gardener book from the Gettle family at Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, and I look in there and see all the beautiful fruit. I see the pictures in their catalog, and I think, man, that's the kind of garden I want to have. I get online and I look at a lot of guys who are doing gardening videos, and I say, man, those are beautiful gardens. I wish mine looked like that. Well, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'm really proud of my garden. Sometimes it looks pretty sad. Today is one of those days where I see signs of hope for some of the garden, but I also see a lot of sadness in my garden and things that didn't quite work out the way I'd hoped, or things that are struggling along. I can't compare myself to others, and neither should you. When you start comparing yourself to others, you're setting expectations that you probably aren't able to meet, because you don't have the same resources, you don't have the same circumstances, you don't have the same tools and the same weather that they've got. So if you compare yourself to others, you're generally setting yourself up for disappointment. So I encourage gardeners, if you're watching videos online, if you're watching my garden videos or anyone's videos, enjoy them and be glad for those gardeners and their successes and rejoice with them. But, don't set yourself up for disappointment and discouragement by comparing your garden to their garden, because your garden's yours. And what you can do with your garden is have a small success here or a small success there, until you really, one day you walk out in your garden with your cup of coffee in the morning, you take a deep breath and look around, and you think, wow, this is great. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get up and walk out and say, man, this doesn't look like so-and-so's garden, or you think it doesn't compare to them, and you get discouraged. Don't go down that path. You should never compare yourself to others. And that goes for life, that goes for your garden. Fourthly, gardening is a long-term commitment. I mean, think about it. It's only natural. It takes, 60, 70, 80 days for a fruit crop or a vegetable crop to go from being planted to harvest. So that's 3 months of investment of time. You have to think about how things break down in soil over time to amend soils, and how the seasons work. You're not in this to get an instant gratification. If that's the case, get you a bucket and put some soil in to plant some radish seeds in the spring, and 28 days later you'll be having radishes. That's fun, and that's often what we do in the spring, because we need that little boost of success. But you've got to commit to a long-term gardening plan. Get yourself a calendar. I like to use a book because I like that kind of stuff. I still like a pencil and some paper. You can use a spreadsheet, a calendar, your Google Calendar, whatever it is. Get yourself a calendar and plan out the entire year, and go into next year and have a long-term plan for your fertilizing schedules, your things that you need to do on time. I'll tell you, I didn't do my seeds this year. I didn't start my seeds because we had an awful end of last year that derailed some of my memory, and I hadn't written it down in my book. I didn't even look at my book, and so I didn't start seeds this time, and that set me back. That's okay. I think long term, I can adjust, and I can compensate, and do some things that I can start a little bit later. In fact, I'm going to start some okra and see if I can't get some interesting varieties of okra going this year. For example, my fig trees. These are long-term, multi-year projects. Each of these fig trees goes in as a stick or a plant about that tall, and they grow fast, but generally I have to prune them down to where they're about 12 inches tall in their first year so I can train their growth and get them shaped the way I want to. So you have to think long-term with these figs and enjoy them, you know, for several years. Same thing with my muscadines. I started these, I believe, in 2017, and this is the first year that I can expect a good fruit harvest. I've been training them down these wires. I've been working with them and pruning them and cleaning them up, and they've been fertilized on a strict schedule their first year. And I first had to, they came in, they were about this tall. I had to get them all the way up to the wire, and then I had to split them and branch them out to go two different directions. And yeah, it took a long time, but this year, look at all this fruit we're gonna get. Every one of those little buds in there represents fruit. So we're gonna have a good season this year. Year 3 is when you can expect fruit from your muscadines if you grow them properly. And I knew that going in, and I planned on a 3-year startup to get these things going. And now I've got to think every single year, how do I dress these vines? So it is a very satisfying task to grow a little micro vineyard like this with these muscadine grapes. But it is a long-term task, and you've got to be able to expect that. Number 5. You don't need all those tools and the latest gadgets and all that wizardry you see advertised. You can get by with a minimal amount of tools. It's nice to have a specialized and quality tool. It's a joy to use a quality tool, but really you don't need them. You don't need you don't need 7 different kinds of hose and 3 different kinds of shovels and specialized rakes and especially some of those weeding systems you see. Man, they just never ever work for me. I find that what I use one shovel, I use my grub hoe, which often acts as a shovel. Sometimes I'll use my light hoe, but usually I use my grub hoe, and I use a hand trowel. And that's all I use in my gardening for most of my gardening tasks. Now you'll see me using other things as well, but I could get by. If all I had was a shovel and one of these cheap hand trowels, actually this one's a pretty good one, nice and solid, no weld there to break. This is a Corona brand. I don't know where we got it, but I've been working with that for years. A shovel, a grub hoe, and a hand trowel. Those are the things I use the most. Occasionally, oh, let me add a rake. You need one rake. And I use a rake for pulling things off the garden and just scraping and doing all the things you do with a rake. So that's just 4 tools. If you have 4 tools, I said 3, that's 4. That's all you need. And really, I could do what I do with the rake if I used my grub hoe. I could get by with it. So you don't need all those gadgets. Now, it is nice to have a specialized tool, and I believe if you're going to buy a tool, you ought to buy a good quality tool that's going to last you. But you know, if you can't afford all that stuff, don't be discouraged. Just get by with what you got. I mean, I think you get what I'm talking about. You don't need all the latest gadgetry. You can get by with a minimal of tools, and so that should encourage you. New gardeners often think, wow, I've got to go buy myself a garden kit and an apron and a garden wagon. I've got to have a seat to sit on while I weed my garden. I've got to have a knee pad. I've got to have all the stuff. And you could really break your bank that way. You don't need all that stuff. Some of it's nice to have. I'll tell you one thing I really enjoy is my gorilla cart. I love that thing. I drag it around. I carry things in it. I mix my soil in it, and yeah, I love that thing. It's served me well. I don't even have a wheelbarrow. I don't use a wheelbarrow anymore because they're too much work to me and they rut up my ground. I like my wagon. That's a good quality tool. I want to take care of it and enjoy it, but I don't necessarily need it. I could mix my dirt on a tarp. I don't need a fancy composting bin that you rotate. I can throw my compost over on the side of my house on the ground if I had to, or I can just buy some cheap hog wire and make bins, and that's been serving me for 15 or 20 years, those hog wire bins. Yeah, you don't need all the stuff. But these bins have been serving me for years and years, and yeah, I like them. I got a trash can here I can compost in. I don't have to rotate anything around. I just get in there with a fork every now and then and turn it. You could use a shovel. So yeah, that's the thing we need to think about, is gardening is hard work. And we can't have false expectations when we go into doing our gardening tasks. We want to have realistic expectations so that we're not disappointed, so we don't get discouraged easily. And man, these are things that nobody tells you. When I first got into gardening, I thought it was going to be quaint. I thought it was going to be easy. I thought it was something that old men did and went and puttered around in their backyard. And you know, that's just not the case. This is good, hard work. So yeah, I wish somebody had told me some of these things, but I'm really glad that I've learned them by experience, and God's been gracious to me, and I have not given up. And though we have challenges every single year, and we've got challenges this year in that garden over there, you know, it's a fun thing to do. I put some good food on the table sometimes. I get to spend time with my family, and I really enjoy it. So take encouragement by having realistic expectations. And if you have those realistic expectations with your garden, wow, you'll have a good time out there. You'll do some amazing things, and you'll find that gardening is enjoyable, and it's a place of peace for you. So there you go. 5 things people don't tell you when you get started into gardening. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you will have success. And I hope you'll subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And like us on Instagram and Facebook. Y'all take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.